Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Dennis Prager Show. And we have a scientist addressing the issue. He is Douglas Axe. He has a Ph.D. Director of the Biologic Institute, a nonprofit research organization launched by Discovery Institute in Seattle. And he did his undergraduate at UC Berkeley, doctoral work at Caltech, postdoctoral and research scientist positions at the University of Cambridge, the Cambridge Medical Research Council Center, and the Babraham Institute in Cambridge. His work, the reason I'm doing this whole long bio is so you'll understand his science credentials. His work and ideas have been featured in such scientific journals as the Journal of Molecular Biology, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and Nature. You can't get more prestigious than those three. Dr. Douglas Axe, welcome to the Dennis Prager program.
Thank you for having me.
I am delighted. Douglas Axe, by the way, Axe is A-X-E. The book is Undeniable. It's a great title. Undeniable, How Biology Confirms Our Intuition That Life is Designed. The book is up at DennisPrager.com. Undeniable. That's right, undeniable. That is your claim. It is undeniable. Did you start out with this belief that it was designed, life?
You mean starting out life or starting out the book?
Yes, starting out life.
Well, I can't recall what my thinking was as a young child. I was not raised in a church-attending home, and I don't think I ever found, in fact, I can say with confidence, I never found the evolutionary story to be plausible, but I don't think I spent a lot of time worrying about it. And then as an undergraduate, I started to really think about these two alternative stories about life, that it is something that God made, being the one story, which I favored, and the alternative being that it's basically an accident, that we are cosmic accidents. And I saw those two things in conflict. I had no doubt about what I believed, and I just saw an opportunity to do science to test the alternative, and so that's what I ended up doing.
My older brother is a physician. He's a professor of medicine at Columbia, and he went to Harvard Medical School. And I only mention this so that people will again see scientific credentials. And I'll never forget when he was there, and he said to me, his younger brother by 6 years, and he said, I looked in the microscope, I saw the cell, and I thought, this is just, it's too complex to have just happened on its own. Is that the sort of thing that happened to you?
I think one of the things I bring out in the book is something called the universal design intuition, and this is broadly acknowledged. It's not, I gave it that name, but it's broadly acknowledged that from a very early age, 2 or 3, we start to look at, we meaning everyone, we look at living things and attribute them to a godlike designer. So I had that all along. What emerged later was the idea that one could defend that intuition. Because, of course, when we reach our teen years, you go off to high school, you go off to college, people start to say, well, yes, we have the intuition, but that's just an intuition. If you do science carefully, you see that Darwin had the correct explanation and the intuition is wrong. So it occurred to me only later, I was really a graduate student, when it occurred to me that it would be possible to go into the lab and do the sorts of experiments that would tell you which of these two is right. Is the intuition right, or is the Darwinian story right? It turns out that the intuition is right, but in approaching the book, I wanted not just to give people a simple explanation of technical science, but to show that you can do very simple, the sort of simple science that we all do every day, which I call common science. That shows the intuition is correct.
Give an example.
An example of common science or of the intuition?
Yeah, either way. But you just said, things that we do daily using scientific logic, and that would show a person why design is more likely.
Yeah, so I mean, just in terms of explaining what I mean by common science, I say in the book that we are all model builders. If you've had children or if you've been around babies, from before their first birthday, they are watching how things move. They're getting a model of balance and gravity. They have notions of color. They have, even before they have words to assign to categories, they know what a cat is, they know what a dog is, and you can parade 1,000 cats and dogs before them, and they'll know which are cats and which are dogs. They may not even have the word cat and dog yet, but they have these categories. So all of these things are observation of data, and we start doing this from birth, and model building, and then testing the models and refining the models. So I give several examples of this in the book, but we're basically all scientists. We do that form of science from the cradle, and we keep doing it. And this design intuition comes out of that, is what I argue in the book. And not only that, you can test this science. You can put it to a common sense,
Well, that's
test.
what the atheists, at least the vigorous atheists, that's what they deny. They say it's untestable, the design thesis.
It actually is testable. And in other words, you can construct a logical argument that shows that it can't be wrong. So maybe it's provable. Maybe that's an even stronger and better term to use. We can't rerun history and see what happened in history, so that's true. Darwin's theory is testable and refutable, and you can show, and we've done that in the lab for 25 years. We've been going to the lab, looking at what can happen when accidental changes happen to genes, and trying to determine whether the sorts of transitions, new functions, new inventions can happen by accident, and they can. So it is testable. Darwin's theory is testable, and we've shown that by falsifying it. It does not stand up to the test. I'm claiming that the design intuition is actually provable by simple logic, simple common sense logic.
So answer me this. I believe in design, okay? So yep. I'm telling everybody my if they will, if that's the word that they want, my bias to begin with. But if that's true, and if what you just said is true, that Darwin is disprovable, then we are in a very precarious position in the world, because it means that the overwhelming majority of scientists have been corrupted.
True. It's a very, and I'm not sure, and I don't know of anyone who's done the sort of survey that would need to be done, where you very carefully protect the identities of the people being surveyed. I'm not sure if such a survey were done among life scientists, what fraction of them honestly, in their heart of hearts, believe that life can be an accident, and what fraction of them are highly skeptical of that. I suspect that there's more skepticism than we realize toward the Darwinian story. What happens is, in the sciences, as in every human sphere, politics comes into play and peer pressure comes into play, and people are afraid, scientists are afraid to speak out against orthodoxy, because scientists get punished for speaking out against this particular orthodoxy.
I have to admit to you, my dear listeners, that I am in one of those positions in life that every so often happens, where I don't quite understand why people would assume that everything is random. It would strike me that if somebody had not been educated in any science whatsoever, but they were intelligent and literate and given nothing about Darwin and nothing about evolution and nothing about God and nothing about design, nothing, and just say, look at the world, do you think it happened on its own? Everything did. That we went from rocks to Beethoven with no design, or do you think there was a design? I think that 99% of people would say there was a design. You have to learn that there's no design. Now, you said, Douglas Axe, that there are simple tests that one could use, or you have used, to show design. And I asked you for an example, but I don't think I got any.
Well, I corrected. I said that I think that Darwin's claim is testable, and my evidence for that is that I've tested it. We spent 25 years testing it. To say that, I guess you could say design would be testable in this sense if someone could come up with an accidental way to get inventions, then that would refute the design.
Okay. So in other words, you're saying there are tests to refute randomness, which
Right.
thereby implies, because there's no other possible implication, that there's design.
Correct. And in theory, if someone could go out and show, and there have been these claimed demonstrations. I mean, Richard Dawkins did a demonstration in The Blind Watchmaker where he used gibberish letters and he evolved them to get a line from Shakespeare. Methinks it is like a weasel. If any of those tests prove true in this sense, that they prove that accidental causes that know nothing about where they're going can invent something clever, then that would be a refutation of the design claim. There are no such examples, and I give these claimed examples, several of them in the book, and show one by one none of them work. They're all false. So in that sense, it is refutable, but it won't be refuted because it's true. So I also said I think there's a basic, simple, logical argument, rational argument that everyone can get. It's not technical, that shows why that will never happen. Accident will never invent.
I see. Okay, fine. So now I'll ask you a question that is more psychological than empirical science, but nevertheless, I'm just curious. And this is really, and I'm asking it because I'm puzzled by it. I don't have a full answer. Why do people want to believe that there is no design?
That's a curious question. I think it's in the last chapter of my book. I'm trying to turn to it right now. Yeah, it is. It's in chapter 14. Richard Dawkins sponsored bus ads. You may have seen this in the news a couple of years ago.
In Britain.
Mm-hmm. In London. Yeah. And the ads, so these big banners appear on the sides of buses in London, said, "There's probably no God. Now stop worrying and enjoy your life." And I have to admit, the first time I saw that, I thought, I don't even get the thought that's being conveyed there. Because if someone were to convince me that there's no God, my life would go into crisis. Because
right, I would start worrying. That's when I would
start worrying.
Yes.
Right. So I thought, I don't even understand the logic of this.
That's right.
But I pondered it a bit, and I think what's really being said there is I've found a way to do life telling myself that there is no God, and part of that has involved me telling myself that this feeling of guilt I have for living life as though there is no God is false, and I can overwrite that guilt and I can suppress it and say, I'm not wrong to live this way. My life is my own. I think that must be what Dawkins is referring to. Once you've gone down that course...
In other words, you're not being judged? Is that it?
Yes. The idea that you will not have to give account to anyone your life.
Yeah, that's what I agree totally with you. I think that's behind it.
Yeah.
People don't want to be judged. And that's ultimately what I think is involved here.
Yep.